Commander Vela stood at the observation deck of her warship, the Eternal Dawn, and watched the stars pass by like cold diamonds scattered across black cloth. She was tall, even by the standards of her people. The Corran were giants among the galaxy's species, standing nearly 3 meters high, with bodies built for war. Their skin was thick like armor. Their bones were dense like metal. Their muscles shimmered with a crystal-like quality that made them stronger than almost any other race in the known universe. Vela had commanded this ship for 15 cycles. She had fought in 12 major battles and had never lost. Her crew respected her. Her enemies feared her. She was proud of what she had built, proud of the warriors who served under her. So when the Galactic Coalition sent her a human, she felt insulted. She remembered the day he arrived. The shuttle docked at Bay 3, and she went to meet it herself. She wanted to see this creature with her own eyes. She had read reports about humans. She had seen pictures, but she had never stood in front of one. The shuttle door opened, and he stepped out. His name was Tay. He was small, so very small. He stood at barely half her height, with a lean body that looked like it might break if she touched it too hard. His skin was soft and smooth, without any natural protection. His eyes were dark and quiet, and he moved with careful, measured steps. Vela looked down at him and felt nothing but disappointment. "You are the human soldier?" she asked. Her voice was deep and rumbled like distant thunder. "Yes, Commander," he replied. His voice was calm and steady. "I am honored to serve on your ship." Vela did not respond to his politeness. She turned to her second-in-command, a large Corran male named Orin, and spoke in their native language. "This is what the Coalition sends us." This small, fragile thing? Orin's crest flicked in amusement. "Politics, Commander. The Coalition wants to integrate humans into the fleet. They believe it will strengthen the alliance." "Strengthen?" Vela almost laughed. "Look at him. He would shatter in a real fight." She turned back to Tay. He stood there patiently, his expression unchanged. If he understood that she was mocking him, he did not show it. "You will be assigned to maintenance duties," Vela told him. "You will repair systems, clean filters, and assist the engineering team. Do you understand?" "Yes, Commander." "Good. Aaron will show you to your quarters." She walked away without another word. She had more important things to worry about than one fragile human. Over the following days, Vela barely noticed Tay. He was quiet. He did his work without complaint. He woke early and finished late. He never asked for help, never made excuses, and never caused problems. Some of the Corran crew found him amusing. They would make jokes about his size, his soft skin, his weak body. They would laugh about how he could not lift the heavy equipment they carried with one hand. They would wonder out loud how humans had even survived long enough to reach the stars. Tay never responded to their mockery. He simply continued his work, moving through the ship like a shadow. Vela watched him sometimes, curious despite herself. She noticed that he observed everything. His dark eyes were always scanning, always learning. He memorized the layout of the ship within 3 days. He learned the names of every crew member within a week. He understood the ship's systems better than some of her own engineers within 2 weeks. But still, she saw no warrior in him. Only a small, quiet creature doing small, quiet work. One evening, Vela was walking through the lower corridors when she found Tay alone in one of the training rooms. He was practicing with a combat knife, moving through forms that she did not recognize. His movements were smooth and precise, like water flowing over stones. She stood in the doorway and watched. He knew she was there. She could tell by the slight pause in his breathing. But he did not stop. He continued his practice, the blade dancing in his hands. "Where did you learn that?" Vela asked. Tay finished his form before answering. He turned to face her, the knife held loosely at his side. "My grandfather taught me," he said, "and his father taught him. It has been passed down in my family for many generations." "It looks graceful," Vela admitted, "but grace will not save you in a real battle. You need strength, power, the ability to crush your enemy before they crush you." Tay nodded slowly. "That is one way to fight. It is the only way." Perhaps for the Corrin? Vela felt a flash of irritation. What is that supposed to mean? Tay looked up at her. His eyes were calm, without fear or challenge. Humans are not strong like your people, Commander. We cannot crush our enemies with raw power. So we learned other ways. We learned to be patient, to watch, to wait for the right moment. We learned that a small blade in the right place can do more than 1,000 fists in the wrong one. Vela stared at him. She did not know what to say. But I am sure you are right, Tay continued, his voice soft. Strength is what matters most in war. He bowed slightly and walked past her, leaving her alone in the training room. Vela stood there for a long moment, thinking about his words. Then she shook her head and dismissed them. He was just a human. What could he possibly know about real combat? She returned to her duties and pushed the conversation from her mind. The weeks passed, and the Eternal Dawn continued its patrol along the Broken Rim. This was dangerous space, filled with pirates and raiders who preyed on supply ships and small colonies. Vela kept her crew on alert, but the journey had been quiet so far. Too quiet. Some of her officers whispered Vela did not believe in bad luck or omens. She believed in strength and preparation. Her ship was the finest in the fleet. Her crew was trained and ready. Whatever came, they would face it and destroy it. She had no doubt about this. But late at night, when she walked the empty corridors of her ship, she sometimes thought about the human. She thought about his quiet eyes and his careful movements. She thought about the way he observed everything, learned everything, and said almost nothing. She thought about his words in the training room. A small blade in the right place. She did not understand why those words stayed with her. She did not understand why she remembered them at all. On the 21st day of their patrol, Vela woke to the sound of alarms screaming through the ship. Red lights flashed in her quarters as she leaped from her bed and grabbed her weapon. Orin's voice came through the cum, sharp with urgency. Commander, we are under attack. The Vorn have found us. Vela felt her blood turn cold. The Vorn. The most brutal raiders in the sector. Insectoid killers who lived only for conquest and slaughter. She ran toward the bridge, her heart pounding. The real test was about to begin. Vela reached the bridge in seconds. Her officers were already at their stations, their clawed hands flying across control panels as data streamed across every screen. Through the main viewport, she could see the enemy ships emerging from behind a nearby asteroid field. 3 Vorn raiders, their hulls black and jagged, like the shells of insects.
Ow.
Report, Vela commanded. Her tactical officer, a young Corrin named Dax, turned to face her. His eyes were wide with concern. They disabled our engines with a precision strike, Commander. We cannot move. Shields are at 60% and falling. They are preparing boarding pods. Vela's claws tightened. This was not a random attack. The Vorn had planned this. They had waited for the Eternal Dawn to enter a specific zone, then struck with perfect timing. Someone had given them information about the patrol route. There was no time to think about that now. She had to protect her ship and her crew. All hands to battle stations, she ordered through the ship-wide cum. Prepare for close combat. The Vorn are coming aboard? She grabbed her weapon, a heavy plasma rifle that most humans could not even lift, and headed for the main corridor. Orin fell into step beside her. Where will they breach? Vela asked. Lower decks, Orin replied. Near the engine section? That is where the hull is weakest after their strike. Vela nodded. She gathered her best warriors and led them down through the ship. They moved quickly, their heavy footsteps echoing through the metal corridors. The Corrin were ready for battle. They were always ready, but the Vorn were faster. The first boarding pod crashed through the hull before Vela's team could reach the lower decks. Then another. Then another. The sound of tearing metal screamed through the ship as the enemy forced their way inside. Vela heard the fighting begin. Plasma fire, screaming, the horrible clicking sound that Vorn made when they killed. She pushed her team forward. But the Vorn had chosen their entry point well. They had breached in multiple locations, forcing Vela to split her forces. Worse, they had struck near the engine room, where the corridor had been damaged by the initial attack. When Vela reached the area, she found her path blocked by collapsed bulkheads. Tons of twisted metal sealed the way forward, like a massive door. Commander Dax's voice came through her cum. We have 20 crew members trapped behind the collapse. Orin is with them. The Vorn are converging on their position from the other side. Vila slammed her fist against the bulkhead. The metal groaned but did not move. Can we cut through? She demanded. It would take hours, Commander. The crew does not have hours. Vela stood there, her mind racing. She was a warrior. She solved problems with strength and power, but there was no amount of strength that could move this much metal in time. Through the cum, she heard Orin's voice. He was calm, but she knew him well enough to hear the fear underneath. Commander, the Vorn are getting closer. We can hear them in the corridors. We are armed, but we are outnumbered. There are at least 30 of them. 30 Vorn against 20 crew members, most of whom were engineers, not soldiers. It would be a massacre. Vela closed her eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt helpless. Then a new voice came through the cum. It was quiet, steady, and completely calm. Commander, this is Tay. I am in Maintenance Shaft 7. I can reach them. Vila's eyes snapped open. She pulled up the ship's layout on her wrist display. Maintenance Shaft 7 was a narrow tunnel that ran through the lower sections of the ship. It connected to the engine room through a series of service passages. It also ran directly through the area the Vorn now controlled. Vela said slowly. That shaft passes through enemy territory. You would have to go through them. Yes, Commander. Alone. Yes. Vela stared at the display. She could see his position marker, a small blue dot in a sea of red enemy signals. He was already moving toward the danger, not away from it. There are 30 Vorn between you and the trapped crew, she said. You are one human. You cannot possibly fight through that many. There was a pause. When Tay spoke again, his voice had not changed. It was still calm. Still steady. I understand the situation, Commander. Then you understand that this is suicide. Another pause. Longer this time, perhaps Tay said. But those people will die if no one helps them. I can reach them. So I will try. Vila wanted to order him to stop. She wanted to tell him that it was pointless, that he was throwing his life away for nothing. A human against 30 Vorn. It was not brave. It was stupid. But before she could speak, his signal began to move. He was crawling through the maintenance shaft, heading deeper into enemy territory. Tay, she called. Tay, respond. Silence. Orin's voice came through the cum again. Commander. What is happening? Vela watched the blue dot move across her display. It was so small, so fragile, surrounded by enemies on all sides. The human, she said quietly. He is coming for you. There was a long silence on the other end. Commander Orin finally said, That is impossible. He cannot survive that. I know. Vela stood at the blocked corridor, surrounded by her warriors, and watched the small blue dot move through a sea of red. She had called him weak. She had dismissed him as worthless. She had given him the lowest duties on her ship because she believed he was not fit for anything else. And now he was walking into certain death to save her crew. She did not understand. The Corrin did not sacrifice themselves for strangers. They fought for honor, for glory, for victory. They did not throw their lives away on hopeless missions. What was the point of dying if you could not win? But Tay was not trying to win. He was just trying to help. Vila thought about their conversation in the training room. She thought about his quiet eyes and his patient words. Small blade in the right place. She finally understood what he meant. He knew he was not strong enough to fight the Vorn directly. He knew he could not defeat them with power. So he was going to use something else. Something she had never considered. He was going to use himself, not as a weapon of strength, but as a weapon of will. Vila lowered her display and looked at her warriors. They were watching her, waiting for orders. They were the strongest soldiers in the fleet, armed with the best weapons, protected by the finest armor, and they could do nothing. A small, fragile human was doing what they could not. Vila said quietly. We need to find another way through. The human will need help when he reaches the other side. If he reaches the other side, she thought. She pushed that thought away and began to move. Behind her, her warriors followed, and somewhere in the dark tunnels of the ship, a single human crawled toward 30 enemies, armed with nothing but a knife, a pistol, and the stubborn refusal to let others die. The maintenance shaft was dark and narrow. Tay moved through it on his hands and knees, his breath slow and controlled. He could hear the Vorn somewhere below him, their clicking language echoing through the metal walls. They were searching for survivors. Hunting through the corridors like insects through a hive, he stopped at a junction and checked his weapons. A combat knife. A pulse pistol with 12 shots. That was all he had. 12 shots. 30 enemies. He did the math in his head. It was not good math. But numbers did not always tell the whole story. Tay had been a soldier for 9 years. He had fought in 6 conflicts before joining the Coalition fleet. He had learned one important truth in that time. Battles were not won by the strongest. They were won by those who thought clearly and acted without hesitation. The Vorn were strong. They were fast. Their bodies were covered in hard shells that could stop most blades. Their claws could tear through metal like paper, but they were also arrogant. They believed they had already won. They were not expecting resistance. They were certainly not expecting a single human to come hunting them. Tay intended to use that. He reached an access panel and slowly pushed it open. Below him was a corridor bathed in red emergency light. 2 Vorn soldiers stood at the far end, their backs turned. They were examining a sealed door. Trying to find a way through, Tay dropped from the ceiling without a sound. He landed behind the first Vorn and drove his knife into the gap between its neck and shoulder, where the shell was weakest. The creature made a wet, gurgling sound and collapsed. Before the second Vorn could turn, Tay grabbed its head and twisted. The crack of breaking shell echoed through the corridor to down. 28 to go. He took one of their weapons, a curved blade designed for cutting through armor. It was heavier than his knife, but would be useful against the shells. Then he moved on. On the bridge, Commander Vela watched Tay's signal through the ship's sensors. She had not looked away since he entered the shaft. Around her, her officers worked frantically to restore engine power and coordinate the defense of the ship. But Vela could only watch, Commander Dax said quietly. 2 Vorn signals just disappeared, Vela nodded. She had seen it too. He killed them. Oren's voice came through the cum. He and the trapped crew were monitoring the same signals. The human killed 2 Vorn. He was lucky, another voice said. He cannot keep doing that. But Tay did. He moved through the ship like a ghost. He used the maintenance shafts, the air ducts, the spaces between walls that the Vorn did not know existed. He learned their patrol patterns within minutes and found the gaps in their search. When he attacked, he was fast and silent. He struck from shadows, from above, from behind. He never gave them a fair fight. He never gave them any warning. The Vorn were used to enemies who faced them directly. They were used to battles of strength against strength. They did not know how to fight something they could not see. One by one, signals began to disappear. Tay took his first wound in the 5th corridor. A Vorn patrol surprised him as he climbed out of a vent. The lead soldier slashed at him with its claws, tearing through his side. Blood poured down his uniform as he rolled away from the second strike. He fired twice. 2 shots. 2 dead Vor. 10 shots left. The wound was bad. He could feel the blood flowing freely, feel his strength beginning to fade. A human body was fragile. It could not take much damage before it failed. But Tay did not stop. He tore a strip from his uniform and pressed it against the wound. The pain was sharp and hot, but he pushed it aside. Pain was just information. It told him he was hurt. It did not tell him to give up. He kept moving in the sealed section. Oren and the trapped crew listened to the battle through the walls. They could hear pulse fire. They could hear the screaming clicks of dying Vorn. They could hear footsteps running, hunting, killing. How many? One of the engineers asked. Oren checked his display. 8 more signals down. He has killed 10 of them. Engineers looked at each other. They had mocked this human. They had laughed at his small body and soft skin. Now he was dying to save them, and they could do nothing but listen. "He is insane," one of them whispered. "No," Oren said slowly. "He is human." Tay found a group of Forvorn in the main corridor. They were dragging something, a body perhaps, toward their boarding pod. He watched them from the darkness above, calculating for enemies. Too many to fight directly? He looked around and found what he needed. A control panel for the corridor's emergency systems. He crawled to it silently and accessed the interface. The Corrin ship had many safety features. One of them was the ability to seal sections in case of fire or hull breach. The doors were heavy, designed to contain explosions. They could also contain enemies. Tay waited until the Vorn reached the middle of the corridor. Then he triggered the system. The doors slammed shut on both ends. The Vorn were trapped in a small section, confused and angry. They began to cut through the doors with their claws. Tay opened an air vent above them and dropped in his last grenade. The explosion shook the corridor. When the smoke cleared, 4 more Vorn were dead. 6 shots left. 16 enemies remaining. Tay dropped down and retrieved another weapon from the bodies. His side was soaking through the bandage now. His vision was starting to blur at the edges. He was running out of time, but the trapped crew was close. Just 3 more corridors, he pushed forward. The remaining Vorn had realized something was wrong. They were no longer hunting. They were gathering, forming into groups, watching every shadow with fear in their compound eyes. They were afraid, Good Tay thought. Fear makes you make mistakes. He found 7 of them in the next corridor. They had formed a defensive position, their weapons pointed at every entrance. They were not going to be surprised. Tay watched them for a long moment. Then he made a decision. He stepped out of the shadows and walked toward them. The Vorn raised their weapons, clicking in confusion. Why was this small creature not hiding? Why was he walking toward them? Tay raised his pistol and fired. 1 shot. 1 dead Vor, the other screamed and charged. Tay ran. He ran through the corridor and around a corner, the Vorn chasing close behind. He ran until he reached the door he had prepared earlier. The door connected to an airlock. He passed through the door and slammed the control panel. The door sealed behind him. Trapping for Vorn in the airlock section, he hit the emergency release. The outer door opened to space. The 4 Vorn were pulled out into the void, their bodies tumbling into the darkness. Tay held onto a support beam until the door closed again. Then he collapsed against the wall, breathing hard. 1 shot left. 9 enemies remaining, and somewhere ahead, 20 people were waiting to be saved. He stood up. His legs were shaking. His wound was bleeding badly, but he was not done yet. Tay picked up his knife and kept walking. The last 9 Vorn had gathered in the corridor directly outside the sealed bulkhead. They knew survivors were behind that door. They were preparing to cut through and finish what they had started. They did not know that something was coming for them. Tay watched them from the ceiling. He had climbed into the maintenance space above the corridor and found a position where he could see all of them. His body was weak. His hands were shaking. The blood from his wound had soaked through everything and left a trail behind him wherever he went. He knew he was dying. He could feel it in the cold spreading through his limbs, and the way his heart was beating too fast. He was trying to pump blood that was no longer there. But he was close now. So close. 9 enemies. 1 shot. 1 knife. The math was still bad. Tay thought about his options. A direct attack would fail. Even at full strength, he could not fight 9 Vorn at once. They would tear him apart before he could kill more than 2 or 3. He needed another way. His eyes scanned the corridor. Emergency systems. Electrical panels. Support structures. Everything could be a weapon if you knew how to use it. He found what he was looking for. A power conduit ran along the ceiling, feeding energy to this section of the ship. If he could break it open and flood the corridor with electrical discharge, this might stun the Vorn long enough for him to act. It might also kill him. Humans were not resistant to electricity. Tay smiled weakly. At this point, it did not matter. He crawled along the maintenance space until he reached the conduit. He could hear the Vorn below, clicking and hissing as they cut through the bulkhead. They were almost through. No. More time. Tay drove his knife into the conduit. The world turned white. Electricity screamed through the corridor like lightning from an angry god. The Vorn shrieked and fell, their bodies twitching as the current ripped through their shells. The lights exploded. The metal walls groaned. Tay fell from the ceiling, his body burning with pain. He hit the floor hard and lay there for a moment, unable to move. Every muscle was locked. Every nerve was screaming, but he was alive. He forced his eyes open. The Vorn were down, stunned by the discharge. Some were already dead, their shells cracked and smoking. Others were trying to rise, their movements slow and uncoordinated. Tay pushed himself to his feet. His legs did not want to work. His arms felt like they belonged to someone else. But he made them move anyway. He raised his pistol and fired his last shot. One Vorn fell. Then he pulled out his knife and went to work. It was not a fight. It was an execution. The Vorn were helpless, their bodies still recovering from the electrical shock. Tay moved among them like death itself, his blade finding the weak points in their armor again and again. When it was over, he stood alone in a corridor filled with bodies. Smoke rose from the walls. The emergency lights flickered weakly. The only sound was his own breathing, ragged and wet. 9 down. 0 remaining. Tay walked to the sealed bulkhead. His hands left bloody prints on the metal as he reached for the emergency release. The door had been damaged by the Vorn's cutting. The manual controls still worked. He pulled the lever. The bulkhead groaned and slowly opened. On the other side, 20 crew members stared at him. Oren stood at the front, his weapon raised, ready for enemies. When he saw Tay, his weapon lowered slowly. The rest retreated to their pods, Tay said. His voice was barely a whisper. "You are safe now." He tried to take a step forward. His legs finally gave out. Oren caught him before he hit the ground. The large current held the small human in his arms and stared down at him with an expression of complete shock. "Get the medical team," Oren ordered. Now, the engineers scrambled to obey. Oren looked down at the corridor Tay had come through. He saw the bodies. He saw the destruction. He saw the trail of blood that stretched back into the darkness. "How?" he whispered. "How did you do this?" Tay did not answer. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. Behind Oren, the crew members gathered at the door and looked out at the carnage. No one spoke. There were no words for what they were seeing. One human. One small, fragile human. He had killed them all. Commander Vela arrived 15 minutes later. Her team had finally cut through the collapsed section from another direction. She came running down the corridor, her weapon ready, expecting to find a battlefield. She found something else. 17 Vorn lay dead in the final corridor. More were scattered through the passages beyond, left where they had fallen. The walls were scorched. The floor was slick with blood, both alien and human. And in the middle of it all, her crew members knelt around the unconscious form of the human who had saved them. Vela stopped walking. She stood there, looking at the destruction, and felt something she had not felt in decades. She felt small. All her life she had believed that strength was everything. She had trained her body, hardened her mind, built herself into the perfect warrior. She had looked at softer creatures and seen only weakness. But this human, this fragile little thing, had done something she could not do. He had walked into certain death and come out the other side. Not because he was stronger, not because he was faster, not because his body was built for war. He had done it because he refused to stop. Vela walked slowly through the corridor. She looked at each fallen Vorn. She saw the precision of the wounds, the clever use of the environment, the signs of traps and ambushes. This was not the work of a brute. This was the work of a thinking, planning, adapting mind, a mind that had decided that 30 enemies were not enough to make it quit. She reached the place where Tay had fallen. Her crew parted to let her through. She knelt down beside him and looked at his face. He was pale, so pale his uniform was soaked with blood. His body was covered in burns from the electrical discharge. His hands were still wrapped around his knife, even in unconsciousness. He should have been dead. By all logic, by all reason, he should have died in that first corridor. But he was still breathing. Vela reached out and gently took the knife from his hands. She looked at it for a long moment. It was a simple blade, old and worn, with marks on the handle that suggested it had been used for generations. This was his weapon. This small piece of metal, with this, he had challenged an army, Commander Oren said quietly. The medical team is on their way, Vela nodded. She did not look up. He saved us, Oren continued. All of us. He came through the Vorn like they were nothing. I've never seen anything like it. Vela placed the knife gently on Tay's chest. She folded his hands over it. Nor have I, she said softly. She stood up and looked at her crew. They were watching her, waiting. They had seen what the human had done. They had seen her dismissal of him in the weeks before. They were wondering what she would say now. Vela turned back to look at Tay. When he wakes, she said, tell him the commander wishes to speak with him. She walked away, her footsteps echoing through the corridor of the dead. Behind her, the medical team arrived and began their work. And in the darkness of his unconscious mind, Tay dreamed of nothing at all. Tay woke slowly, like rising from deep water. The world came back to him in pieces. First the sound, a soft hum of machines. Then the light, white and gentle. Then the feeling of clean sheets. Beneath his body, and the dull ache that seemed to fill every part of him. He opened his eyes. He was in the medical bay of the Eternal. Dawn, the ceiling above him, was made of smooth metal. Curved like the inside of a shell, medical equipment surrounded his bed, displaying his vital signs in languages he did not understand. He was alive. That surprised him. He had not expected to survive. A movement caught his attention. He turned his head and saw Commander Vela sitting beside his bed. She was watching him with an expression he could not read. How long? Tay asked. His voice was rough and dry. 6 days, Vela replied. You lost a lot of blood. The doctors were not sure you would wake. Tay tried to sit up. Pain flared through his side, and he lay back down with a grimace. Do not move, Vela said. You are still healing. Tay nodded slightly. He looked at the ceiling and thought about the last things he remembered. The darkness, the Vorn, the electricity, the faces of the crew when the door opened. Did everyone survive? He asked, all 20. Because of you. Tay closed his eyes. A small smile touched his lips. Good. They sat in silence for a long moment. Vela watched him, her large eyes never leaving his face. Finally, she spoke again. I have commanded warriors for 15 cycles. I have fought beside the strongest soldiers in the galaxy. I have seen bravery and courage in many forms. She paused. I have never seen anything like what you did. Tay opened his eyes and looked at her. I did what was necessary, he said simply. You fought 30 enemies alone. You were wounded, outnumbered, outmatched in every way. You should have died a dozen times. But you kept going. Vela leaned forward slightly. Why? Tay was quiet for a moment. He thought about the question carefully before answering. Where I come from, he said, there is an old saying. My grandfather used to tell it to me when I was young. He said that a person's worth is not measured by the strength of their body, but by the strength of their heart. Vela listened without interrupting. I was afraid, Commander. From the moment I entered that shaft, I was terrified. Every step, every shadow, every sound. I knew I was probably going to die. My body is not built for that kind of fighting. I am not fast enough, not strong enough, not tough enough. Met her gaze. But those people were going to die if no one helped them. And I could help. Maybe not well, maybe not perfectly, but I could try. You could have stayed safe, Vela said. No one would have blamed you. I would not have blamed you, I know. Then why? Tay smiled softly. It was a tired smile, full of pain, but also something else. Something warm. Because courage is not the absence of fear, he said. It is choosing to act despite the fear. Anyone can be brave when they feel no danger. That is not courage. That is just confidence. Real courage is when you know the danger, when you feel the fear in every part of your body, and you move forward anyway. Vila sat back in her chair. She thought about his words for a long time. The Corrin were not afraid of battle. Their bodies were weapons. They faced enemies with confidence because they knew they could win. They called this courage, but it was not. Not really. Tay had known he could not win. He had known his body would fail him. He had known that death was waiting for him in every corridor. And he had gone anyway. Not because he was confident. Not because he felt no fear, because he cared more about others than he feared for himself. That was something the Corrin had never understood. I was wrong about you, Vila said finally. I was wrong about all humans. Tay shook his head. You judged what you saw. We are small. We are soft. We break easily. These things are true, but they are not the whole truth. No, Tay agreed. They are not. Vila stood up. She was so tall that her head nearly touched the ceiling. She looked down at the small human in the bed, and for the first time, she did not see weakness. She saw something else entirely. Among my people, she said, we have a gesture. It is given only to those who have proven themselves beyond question. 2 warriors who have earned the highest respect. She placed her clawed hand over her chest, directly above her heart. Then she bowed her head. You are not frail, Tay. You are forged. Your body may break, but your spirit does not. And that is worth more than all the strength in the galaxy. Tay watched her silently. He did not know what to say. Vela straightened and looked at him with something new in her eyes. It was respect. True respect. Not the kind that came from fear or power, but the kind that came from understanding. When you are healed, she said, you will no longer serve in maintenance. You will serve on the bridge as one of my officers. You have earned that place. Tay blinked in surprise. Commander, I am not qualified. You are qualified, Vila interrupted. More qualified than many who carry that rank. You have shown what you are made of. I will not waste that by hiding you in the lower decks. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. The story of what you did is spreading through the fleet, she said, without turning around. Other commanders are asking about the human who killed 30 Vorn alone. They want to know how it is possible. What do you tell them? Tay asked. Vela was silent for a moment. Then she looked over her shoulder at him. I tell them the truth. I tell them that humans are not what they seem. We looked at your bodies and saw weakness. We were wrong. Your true strength is not in your flesh. It is in something deeper, something we cannot see until it is tested. She paused. I tell them that if they want to understand humans, they should watch what you do when everything seems lost. That is when you show who you really are. She walked out of the medical bay, leaving Tay alone. He lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling. His body hurt. His wounds were deep. He had come closer to death than ever before. But he was alive, and the people he had saved were alive. That was enough. Outside the medical bay, word continued to spread. The story grew with each telling. The small human who walked into darkness, the fragile creature who refused to break, the warrior who showed the galaxy what true courage looked like. And when other species asked, Commander Vela, why she now treated humans as equals, why she gave them positions of honor on her ship, why she spoke of them with such respect, her answer was always the same, because I have seen what they are made of. Not their bodies. Not their bones, their hearts. And a heart that refuses to surrender is the most dangerous weapon in the universe. The stars continued to turn. The war continued to rage. And somewhere on the eternal dawn, a small human healed slowly, dreaming of the next battle he would face. He was not afraid. He never had been.